Hi, it's Pastor Nick from the Grace Church office. I hope that you are staying warm this snowy March 9th. I wanted to share something with you that Paul wrote to the Romans. In Romans chapter 6, verses 9 through 14, Paul writes, "We know that Christ, being raised from the dead, will never die again. Death no longer has dominion over him. For the death he died to sin, once for all, but the life he lives to God. So you also must consider yourselves dead to sin and alive to God in Christ Jesus. Let not sin therefore reign in your mortal body to make you obey its passions. Do not present your members to sin as instruments for unrighteousness, but present yourselves to God as those who have been brought from death to life, and your members to God as instruments for righteousness. For sin will have no dominion over you, since you are not under law, but under grace." There's a story about a young teenager named Stuart Briscoe who was drafted by the Royal Marines during the Korean War. And he ended up coming under the control of a particularly imposing regimental sergeant major who strode around the barracks, leaving a train of tough men quaking in their boots. And Briscoe did not realize how dominant this man had become in his life until the day that he was released from the Marines. He clutched his papers in one hand and had his other hand in his pocket, slouching a little bit and whistling. Sins that would have been so heinous that if they'd been observed by the sergeant major, they would have landed him in big trouble. And at that moment, Briscoe saw his sergeant major walking towards him. On an impulse, he sprang up into the posture of a Marine until he realized that he had died to him. Now, he was not literally dead, and neither was the sergeant major, but as far as the sergeant major's domination of his life was concerned, it was all a matter of history. So Briscoe did some reckoning, decided not to yield to the man's tyranny, and demonstrated that fact by refusing to swing his arms high and march as if on parade and keep his back at ramrod stiffness. Instead, he presented his feet, hands, and back to his newfound freedom as a former Marine, and the sergeant major couldn't do a thing about it. This reminds us of the freedom that we have in Jesus. We no longer have to sin. We no longer are controlled by our sinful passions, but instead we are dead to those and we are alive in Christ and alive to God.